Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and I am the host of this podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I am also a newly minted USA Today best-selling author of the novel Blank. I've created a whole community of book lovers around this podcast, a publishing company, reading retreats, a bookstore, and more. Learn more at zibbymedia.com or follow me on social at Zibby Owens or join the community at Zibby Readers. Paul Scheer is the author of Joyful Recollections of Trauma, a memoir which hit the New York Times bestseller list. Paul is a comedian, actor, filmmaker, and podcaster. Paul is best known for his roles in FX's The League. By the way, I've watched every episode of that show, and Showtime's comedy series Black Monday. He also co-created and starred in MTV's Human Giant and Adult Swim series NTSF SD SUV, and has had recurring roles on ABC's Fresh Off the Boat and HBO's Veep. Away from his acting work, he also co-hosts 2 film discussion podcasts, How Did This Get Made, alongside his wife, June Diane Raphael, and longtime collaborator Jason Mantzoukas, and Unspooled with film critic Amy Nicholson. He currently lives in Los Angeles. Welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Joyful Recollections of Trauma, your best-selling book. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm honored to be on your book club. I mean, this is like truly, that's the biggest honor I could possibly get.
Oh, I loved it. It's so good.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's, not everybody has the bravery or the introspection to say, like, I'm going to take out all of the cabinets of like all my secret stuff and decode them for the entire world. And as someone who has like 20,000 memory boxes like scattered everywhere, I related to that very much. I'm like, who's going to know about this ticket or why it's important to me?
I know, they make me feel so good. Like I have this collection of boxes, and they really do hold everything from like a kindergarten report card all the way to like what my son brought home this year in an art project. It's like little things, not everything. And people are like, oh, you're a hoarder. I'm like, I'm not a hoarder. They're mementos. They are slightly organized. It's not just like everything goes in a box.
Well, before the iPhone, I feel like we couldn't like take a quick picture or it would end up in an album. And that's like my memory now. But before it was a thing from it, right?
Well, what's kind of so crazy about my iPhone too is I never go back and look at those pictures. Thank God they have that wallpaper that shuffles through faces now of my kids. Like, that's amazing. 'Cause I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at that picture in 10 years. Like, we take so many things and we don't like look back at them. I feel like photo albums are such a big deal. Like in my childhood, like, oh, we look through the photo album. Here we are. We remember this moment. And now it's just sort of like we captured it, but we don't log it in any way.
Yeah. And when they do want to sit and look, I'm like, get off my phone. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah,
what are you
exactly.
doing?
Yeah.
It's all one big waste. And so we go back to cat, and I have little ones for my kids too that I've started for them. So they have their own memory boxes. You must have done this too.
I, of course, have done this. I tried to get them into it by making them Nike boxes. Because I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I'm trying to get them on board with it. They do like to hold stuff, but I feel like my kids are so different. They don't like movies. They like movies just fine. But what they're into, everything seems a little bit, I don't think it's bad, but they don't have that quality of like, oh, I want a movie ticket or I remember this thing. It's like, no, we saw it. We did it. Let's move on. And it's for me, I guess because there was no iPad, I spent a lot of time just being like, oh, that's my Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom movie ticket. I have that on my wall because I'm remembering I want to go see that movie. There was everything felt a little bit more special.
Well, having read now I feel like I know you, which of course I don't. But now that I know about your childhood, I could psychoanalyze and say,
yeah, please do.
Moments of escape and otherwise sort of dark and isolated, you hiding all the time. And yet here was this like multicolor world. And of course, why wouldn't you want to remember it?
Yeah, I think, as a kid, we grow up in whatever your background is. I wrote about in my book, I came out of this like kind of abusive household where we were kind of held captive by this evil stepfather. And, you find your own ways out, but also at the same time, it's all mixed together, right? Like, it's like there are these things like your play is kind of based around the situation of your house. So it's like you are still like other kids are still playing probably the same way I am, just the stakes are different, right? But I don't know that the stakes are different because I'm just a kid. I don't know what's going on in your house or what's going on in the house next to that.
That's true. Like we could be speaking French. That could be
Yeah,
normal for
exactly.
you.
Yeah, you don't know. It's
You
like
just never
everything
know.
is normal until you get older and then you start telling. I mean, that's really how the book started for me was I do this podcast called How Did This Get Made with Jason Mantzoukas and my wife, June Diane Raphael. And I would tell these stories about my childhood and the look of shock on their face whenever I would tell these stories. I'm like, wait, that's normal though, right? Isn't that normal? And they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, oh, wait. Even I don't know if you ever found this, but yeah, as an adult, you get your own doctor and you go to your doctor and the doctor's like, oh, what, tell me your backgrounds and this and that. And I realized that like, even what my parents told me about like how certain relatives died were like sugar coated, right? Like, oh, he died of a broken heart. It's like, well, no, he had like, he had heart disease. Like he smoked too much, like these like weird things that no parent follows up with like, oh, remember when I told you that?
Yeah.
That was actually a total lie.
Yeah. Let me backtrack here about 30 years and give you the real truth. Oh my gosh. Well, it's easy to sort of joke past, well, anything, I guess, but the abuse in your house was significant. I mean, this guy, Hunter, was horrific. I mean, horrific. And the moment where your mom was finally like, okay, let's just go. And she did it. I wanted to like stand up in the audience and start clapping. That is hard to do. And many women never get to do that. And they just don't. They're stuck forever. And at least you guys, not at least, obviously it was really bad, but I'm glad that she took you and you got out of it.
My mom is a pretty amazing person. She's in her 70s. She retired and moved out to LA to spend more time with her grandkids, and then immediately got a job that was more powerful than the job that she had in New York before she retired. And she's like back and doing it. And she's one of those people who I think is always, she loves working. She's really smart. And like, part of this too, I think, people would say like, well, how did your mom let this happen? Or how did your parent, I think that you can be incredibly smart, you can be incredibly even successful, but you can still get caught in these traps, right? It's a weird thing where you don't want to appear to be weak. Even that term abuse is like something I had a hard time wrestling with, like labeling abuse. And, so I think it's very easy to like look on the outside and say, oh, she should have been able to do this or that. But what I like to kind of say about my mom is like, it took her a beat, but we got out, we did this thing. And that sometimes what she did to get us out, to work 2 jobs and kind of sneak us out in the middle of the night in a certain way, I'm just blown away by. And, as a parent now, I think I have so much more empathy. I love my mom. I have a great relationship with my mom, but like also all the things that a parent has to juggle, because we talked about like, you're trying to make it okay too. Like my mom was trying to make it okay in this time of insanity. And that's really hard as a parent, because you really can't show emotions. Like you can, but you have to always still be the leader.
Yep. I always think about the movie Life is Beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And how he would distract his daughter with like games of hide and seek, when really, the power you have as a parent to get your kid through anything, even if it's something that you've inadvertently sort of landed them in. It's really significant.
Well, they're always looking to you, and I think it's this thing that's so, you forget like how, not open-minded, but how the kids will believe you. They're there for you. And that's really, as I've had kids, you realize the power of that and how it can be kind of construed in a different way, and how certain things can balloon. My kids love Mr. Beast. I don't know if your kids love Mr. Beast.
Yes, I have one kid who's obsessed.
Okay.
We even ordered the hamburgers on like,
oh my gosh,
it was disgusting.
Okay, we're wearing the sweatshirts. We have the Feastables. And I've watched a lot of Mr. Beast.
Chocolate bars.
Yes, 100%. So they're watching one video, and it was like, I hired an assassin to come and get me, and if he can find me, he'll get $1 million, right? And we're driving because they were watching it in the car, and I said, my youngest son, who's 7, was like, Dad, what's an assassin? And now normally I would think about this before I say anything. I go, oh, just like, it's like when you hire someone to kill you. and it goes. And we were driving, things were happening, going quick, and I'm putting him down to bed, and he was like, I could tell he was nervous. I was like, what's going on? He's like, I'm worried the assassin's going to kill me. I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. There's not going to be an assassin to kill you. And you realize like, oh my gosh, I just said this thing so cavalierly. And it just blew open his world of like, oh yeah, you can hire people to kill someone. And then of course his older brother sticks his head down. He's like, no one wants to kill you. Maybe dad. And I'm like, well, no, 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 no one. And like, so like it was like, but you like those little details are so much to take in, and there are things that we say so kind of cavalierly because it's like, of course I know what an assassin is, but
Yeah.
like they've never heard it before.
Yeah. In the chaos, the questions and answers,
Yeah, it's
ridiculous.
I am walking on eggshells in this house because we were having lunch yesterday. My wife was away, and it was just me and the two boys. And in the middle of lunch, no distractions. My youngest goes, "Is Santa real?" And I go, "What?" And I was like, "Wait, I'm sorry." And he goes, "Yeah, is Santa real?" I'm like, "Huh." I was like, "That's interesting." I was like, "So now," I'm like, I don't know how to get like I can't not like get out of this question, and I'm so trapped by it. And I'm like, I mean, what do you think? What's real? What's like I'm trying not to like overtly lie, but I also feel like lunch is not the perfect moment for this conversation either. But you're just trying to like bob and weave. My friend's a child psychiatrist or psychologist, and she said to me when my wife's father died, we were like nervous. Like, how do we deal with this? Like, what do we say to the kids? They're too young. My youngest at that point, or my oldest was like only like 1.5, 2 years old, but he understood enough. He could talk, and she said, just say like be honest but brief. And I always try to be like that's what I always try to do. Just be like just honest and brief, and because it's like the minute you start concocting a world, that's when you get into trouble.
It's so true. I accidentally ended up telling them that the tooth fairy didn't exist, like as we were getting onto a flight. And then the whole time,
no.
my daughter just sat there crying. And now, like, fast forward to last week where she lost another tooth, and she was just like, I lost my tooth at school. Can you just give me $20? And I was like, I'm not paying you to lose your teeth.
Right.
She's like, but aren't you the tooth fairy? And I was like, it doesn't work like that.
Well, my kids, we brought them to Walt Disney World, and my kids are so excited to meet like Woody and Buzz. And there's something really kind of magical about you watch these movies as a kid and you see that they're toys, right? Like Woody and Buzz are toys. But then you go to Walt Disney World and they're walking around and they're bigger than humans, in their big suits and stuff. And my kids are so excited. They're meeting Woody and Buzz and they're talking to Woody and Buzz. But there's like disconnect of like, they're not realizing, well, that doesn't make any sense. And my kid was so excited. He's like, oh my gosh, he was talking about Woody. And my wife's like, yeah, but those are just people in suits. And I watch him go, what?
Oh.
And I'm like, I was like, because it's like, she wasn't even trying to like undercut it. She was just kind of saying it like, yeah, but they're just people in suits. Like, it wasn't ill intent, it was, and I was like, oh, and it's such a weird world, and you don't want to be that person that spoils it. But I guess there's always going to be some kid, some world, something that spoils it in some way.
Well, it's amazing that they actually live in a world where they think magical fairies fly in through the window and leave teeth and grab your teeth anyway. I mean, and then I'm like, and I'm trying to rationalize like tying your shoes with this person. Do you know, like all these other things? Like this is what they believe in good faith. Anyway.
I know. It's like it's so interesting because like I want to I'm a big believer in like keeping imagination alive, like whatever that is. It's like it doesn't mean that we have to be like totally in a fantasy world, but it's like I think that like as kids are growing up in this culture, their imaginations are not being used as much as they used to be, or at least I felt like there's a lot of downtime as a kid, and it's like, and I was talking to this director who I love. His name was David Lowery, and he directed movies like very artistic movies like The Green Knight, but he also directed Pete's Dragon, the live action one, which I loved. It's so beautiful. And we were talking about like the importance of empathy, and like when we grew up, like these movies like taught us empathy. E.T. dies. That's sad. And I feel like kids don't have like empathy and imagination the same way because it's sort of like entertainment's being pulled in a different way. They have access to things in a different way. Even if you take away screens, there's a knowledge that's just like you don't like if I wondered about something, I'd have to go to the library, get a book and figure out what it is. It's like you can now ask your parent as a phone, be like, what is that? What's happening there? What's the biggest building? And you don't have enough time to like
Yeah.
ideate on it or whatever and just think about like, what could this be?
Sometimes I'm like, can you just give me 30 seconds for my brain to work? If my brain can't think
Yes.
of it, then let's look. Just like, give
Yeah,
me a second here.
exactly. I know, like that isn't so important, I feel like, to like try to put away the phones and just think about it, have a discussion about it. Like it's like often it's like the fun of it. Like I think back on like parties I was at as a like a high schooler, like we're talking about, oh yeah, remember that movie? That person was in that. No, they were in that. And you're not exactly right, but it's part of the conversation. It's not about we're not writing a research paper. We're just having a conversation. And it's sort of like sometimes a phone can kill
Yep.
that group think.
And the amazing feeling when you actually think of it.
Oh, it's truly
I mean,
satisfying.
what competes with that? No
Nothing.
Google search. Forget it.
No, I know. Yeah.
Towards the end of your book, you realize, thanks to Twitter, that you have ADHD, and your wife's like, yeah, of course you do. I thought that was so interesting. I always wonder if I have ADHD, and now I keep reading all these books, and I'm like, how did you really self-diagnose? And was that a joke, or do you really have that, or how do you feel about it?
No, it's definitely not a joke. The way I came across it was on Twitter, which was a funny way to kind of find out because, every doctor worth their salt will be like, don't go on WebMD, don't do this, don't research your own thing. But this person, kind of accused me of having it. And I was like, I don't. Of course I don't. And I started to like kind of look in on Twitter, like I typed in ADHD. It was like ADHD Awareness Day, I think happened at the same time. So it's trending. So I was just looking, I started reading these stories of other people. And I was like, oh, I do that. I do that. Because I think what I thought ADHD was, and I was talking to my cousin about this the other day, was like being hyper. Oh, I'm so hyper. I'm this, I'm that. And it's not that. I think it's like we have this like weird idea of like these things. It's, they can't sit still. They're this, they're that, they're this. And the truth is it manifests in so many different ways. I'm dyslexic to a certain degree. I can read. I love reading. I went to a reading teacher and kind of got better at reading when I was a kid. All these things kind of all add together. So I started like Twitter was my first entry point. I was like, okay. And I went to my therapist and I was like, it's weird. I had this thing and I think I may be that, and my wife was like, yeah, you are. And she's like, well, I'm gonna give you 2 books. Read these 2 books and what do you think? And so I read these 2 books and it was like reading like the instructions of my life. I was like, oh my God. There was like one chapter in one of them where it was like, click yes to whatever you agree to. And it was like 100 questions. And I feel like 80 of them, I was like, yes, it was wild. And then she's like, all right, well, I think now you should go and see a psychiatrist and they can talk to you. And that's when I kind of went and got officially diagnosed as that, which was really interesting because, there's that phrase, you don't want to go through life with like a horse with blinders on. But when I started getting treatment for this, it was like I was going through life with like a horse with blinders on. And it was, and that was a good thing. It was like, oh, I'm able to focus. And my life I've been incredibly productive. I've been lucky to be where I am and what I do. But it felt like my building, like I was a building that was constantly under construction. Like scaffolding was all around it, making sure it was held up. I had my systems in place to be productive. But wow, there was no substitute for actually like literally treating it. It was like a night and day difference. And then there's like this immediate regret of like, wow, what if I had this when I was in high school? Or what if I had this when I was in college? Or really at any given point?
Wow. Well, then all the people who are now so lucky that they get it treated early, thanks to our generation.
Well, that's the kind of crazy thing. I've seen a lot of people really diagnosing themselves lately. And I think what we're kind of realizing on a certain level too is like, there is just more research done. More people are a little bit more introspective, looking at themselves, seeing what they're doing. Like, brain health is as important as any other kind of, thing in our body. Yeah, and it's genetic, and I can see it in my family very clearly. It's like, so I don't know. Yeah, I've been fascinated by like that. Everybody looking at each other, and it was the one chapter I wanted to leave out of the book because I love reading. I love memoirs, and I've read good memoirs, I've read bad memoirs. But like pizza, they're all pretty good. But I there was something about it where I was like, it felt to me like, oh, am I just putting this? I wasn't, but it felt like, oh, is this a chapter about how I have ADHD? That's my hurdle. I'm gonna get over it. And there was something about it that I felt uncomfortable sharing. And I was about to take it out, and my wife was like, "Why are you gonna take that out?" My publisher was like, "Why are you taking that out?" I was like, "Because I just felt like it's still like, it's too like." And I think part of it was I hadn't really told anybody about it. I kept it really to myself. It was kind of fresher than the other things I talked about. And what I came to realize, and now that the book is out, is wow, I'm glad I left it in because it's helped partners identify other partners. It's helped people go like, oh my gosh, I have that same thing. And I think I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I will say that.
I'll pat you on the back.
All right. A
I'll
lot of
just,
people, thank you. Ooh, thank you.
yeah,
That feels
okay.
good. I think a lot of people will look at me and go, well, you're very productive. You've done a lot of things. You're not what I think like someone who has ADHD has. And it allows them to kind of look at themselves. It's not like, oh, I couldn't pay my bills. I never got up. I was depressed. I was this. I didn't get anything done. And I think that, I don't know, there's something about like, I've talked to a few very productive people who are like, I feel like I have this. This is really helpful to me. I have a good friend who got tested and he's like thrilled. And yeah, so I think that that's important too. I think that there's a stigma around all of this, like what ADHD looks like, what it is, who the type of people it is, they are. So yeah, so I'm glad I added it in, but it was like the chapter I was the most like, I'm nervous about that one.
Oh, well, I think it's another example. I feel like this courses throughout the book of just you're being able to get through anything and maybe understand it later. Maybe it pays off later. Even like that job that you had where you
Right.
negotiated severance for like
Yeah.
months. Like you can get through anything. I mean, obviously, a childhood of abuse and a really boring job are different animals, but it's the same sort of tenacity and the motivation for inspiration rather for people reading to be like, oh, okay, well, just stick through it and things will get better at the end. Like you just have to get through it.
Well, I think that there's like something about, this book is not the book that I intended to write, in many respects. I think that in the beginning it was going to be like funny childhood stories, which I would have loved to do. But as I was writing it, this kind of came out naturally because I was telling a fuller version of the stories. And, one of the things I realized when I saw it all together, because it was coming together in bits and pieces, was oh, I'm so lucky to have friends and a support system, a wonderful wife, a great family. But at the same time, too, there's a part of me, it's like you have to keep on there's no easy way, there's no exit, there's no shortcut, right? Like you just have to keep on kind of working on things and hopefully you tie yourself to people that will help you achieve that, and but if there's no one in there, it may have to come down to you. And, and maybe there's moments where you are lifted up and maybe there are moments where you're by yourself. But yeah, I think it's important to kind of do both, a little bit of both. Like, I'm not saying you're lift yourself up by your bootstraps. That's the only way. It's like, no, I think that there's just certain moments where you can't count on anyone and you have to look for yourself. And there's moments where you have to count on everybody. And yeah, to me, I loved writing this book for a couple of reasons, because I was afraid that it would fall in this category of memoir that would be like show busy. And I didn't want that. I felt like that's not super relatable. It's like, if I'm Barbara Streisand, God bless, then let's do it because I'll have stories to tell, But the truth is like, I find myself responding to things like Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm so glad my mom died and things like that. Like there's a more universality to it. And that's what I think has been so amazing about this is talking to people like, oh, I wasn't in an abusive household. Oh, I had a friend who was, but I identify with this. I like people identify with things in different ways. So I feel like, I read Paris Hilton's book and I loved it, this section about her going to this boarding school. It was horrific. I didn't have that experience, but I can identify with the feelings there. And I think that sometimes some of these conversations I've had with people, it's not like, oh, you had my life, or it's just like, but we had something where we triumphed over something. And I feel like when you share these stories, sometimes they're dark, sometimes they're light. The book to me, I think is told in that I try to make it entertaining, but it's important to tell these stories because going back to what we talked about in the beginning, is like that empathy, that like, oh yes, I can put myself in these shoes. I can see where I can take from that too. It's important.
And I feel like you included the stories of when you were growing up, some of the stars like Alan Alda and Bill Cosby not being so nice. And like, here you are, now you're a celebrity and you have the chance not only to be nice to people, but literally like pour your heart out and be like, no, I'm so nice that I'm actually going to like write a whole book for you.
Well, you know what? To me, it's like, I'm so lucky. And I'm sure you feel the same way. Like I'm a fan. I'm a fan first, right? I love art. I mean, whatever that is, if it's movies, TV shows, literature, literal art, like music. I like, so I love supporting that. I love seeing people that I love, so I also understand, like, when people come out to see a show, it's money hard earned. And I want to make sure that every experience is worthwhile. People have said to me, like, well, you spend so much time at these book signings. I'm like, well, what else is the option? Like, it's like there's no, like, if someone's going to buy my book, I'm so eternally grateful. Like, it truly is. It's like, because the reason why I'm able to write this book, the reason why I'm able to have a podcast, because people listen, people buy, people support. And like, I can never forget that. Like, that's the most important thing. I don't want to forget it. It's like, so yeah.
I love that. Do you have advice for people trying to write their own memoirs?
I think the best advice I could give is, don't worry about it being perfect. Just start getting it out. It will start to come. Like, I feel like this book to me, and I'm not somebody who is a sculpture artist, but it felt like carving marble. Like, I was like, I have an idea. Okay, this is coming. Oh, this is a little different than what I thought. Okay, like, it just kept on kind of evolving, and I would see it as it was like happening in front of me. It was odd in that way. Like, I knew what I wanted to do, but I also wrote with the knowledge of, because before I sold the book, I wanted to write a lot of it. I wrote about 100 pages of it, and it's not the exact same form, but it was allowed me to go, like, no one's going to see this. If this stinks, forget it. I won't go off and get an agent. I won't try to go sell this book. So writing in that world where it's like, I have complete control. This is not going out. This is not a tweet. I'm like, I can sit with this. I can, so there are moments where I really wrote hard stuff that I was like, I never want anyone to see, but sometimes that's okay because it got me to a nugget, a paragraph, something else that I did think was important. So to me, it was like, let it all go. The editing process will kind of mix and match everything. Like, as a matter of fact, sorry, it's a long answer to your very simple question, but
no, it's great. It's great.
I wanted to write, my first note I ever got was go deeper. Great note. And the next note after that was go even deeper. Again, I'm so thankful for those two notes that kind of kicked me off because I was afraid to go deeper. And in the process of writing, I was like, well, what am I afraid of saying here? And I wrote that chapter of like what I was afraid of saying. And I feel like that was a trauma dump chapter. It was a chapter that was, it was not, there was no lightness. And I think the book really balances. And as a matter of fact, my editor was like, okay, yeah. And we were looking at essays, and that was kind of always put to the side. But when she did her first pass on the book, she took chunks of that and spread it out throughout the book. So happy I wrote that chapter, because as it wasn't tonally right for the book, but it was tonally right in moments and pieces, and it helped paint stuff. So I feel like doing those exercises, not trying to game it, not trying to be like, I got the draft done, I got it. I let the book surprise you. That to me was the best part of it. I love that part of creation anyway. It's like the intent versus what actually is executed is amazing. And, the most exciting part of the book for me was the last 8 weeks from Thanksgiving to January 22nd, where I just worked nonstop on the edits. Because it was like, that's when it started to really like, oh, this and that, and pull this, oh, and this, and you could tie things. It's like, so it's never really done until it's done, and I think I was waiting. I think I was waiting for some sort of magic bullet, like I was going to hand in my book, and then my editor back, here it is. And I was like, oh, no. There's so much you don't know. I think that the other thing too, there's so much I didn't know about writing a book. Wow, I was shocked. And promoting it is a whole other beast. It's like, wow, I thought I've done it before. I've done other things. It's a whole different monster.
Well, you're like out there. I mean, it's great. It's really wonderful what you've been doing.
Oh, thanks. I'm trying to, like, and I don't know what's too much, but I'm also like, the truth is like, I'm proud of the book.
No, it's not too much. It's not too much.
Good.
It's not too much. That's what you have to do. That's what you have.
Yeah, right. Because it's like, when I go to a bookstore and I see like a table full of Tom Selleck books, which is great. And God bless Tom Selleck. But then, and then I see my book, on a shelf and there's 4 or 5 of them. I'm so thrilled to be in the store. Don't get me wrong. But it's hard to compete when you have like a table, a mountain. Bill Maher's book. Bill Maher. But when you go at Barnes and Noble, it's like at every cash register checking out. Like, how can you compete with that? You can't. So I have to go. I have to do it differently.
That's literally, I just wrote a book called Blank, and it's like about that exactly, how publishers push certain books and they're like huge stacks, and like, how can the other person even compete? So the main character hands her book in blank as a commentary on the publishing industry.
My God. Oh, I got to read this. Oh, I can't wait.
Anyway.
Because it really is. That's the most fascinating part. It's like, you can't it's almost built. It's built to work against you.
It's true.
You are out there, and again, and there's other things. People are like, oh, I don't know. I don't know how to game the system. I don't think there's a game system. The only way to game the system is like beg people to be like, not beg, but say like word of mouth, and have like people keep on the tail. But it's like it's like, but I'm very happy to that's. And I want that. Like, and I guess I've talked to some people, especially people like comedians or people in my field. They're like, oh yeah, well, I'm not going to promote the book. It's like, that's their job. I'm like, well, no. I mean, if you care about it, like I spent a lot of time working on this. I'm going to be promoting this book until, and that the word of mouth has been the best thing in many respects.
Yeah. Amazing. Oh my gosh. Paul, thank you so much. This was so fun to talk to you all day. Really appreciate it. It was awesome. And yeah, just so great. So great. Thank you. I'm so glad you let us get to know you.
I'm so happy. And I will say this, not that this is a sales technique at all, but I will say, according to your podcast, title of your podcast, No Time to Read, the audiobook I made it for lovers of audiobooks because I am an audiobook freak and I have extra clips and different things in there to make it a lot more fun because I feel like the carpool is where once the kids are dropped off, I'm back in. I'm in whatever I'm into.
Perfect audiobook plug as well. Congratulations, and thank you so much for your time.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you love it, please leave a review and follow us on social at Zibby Owens and at Zibby Readers.